Gamers in the city of brotherly love to a self-proclaimed nerd on the fashion runway. My next guest leads a double life as a Victoria's Secrets model and a computer programmer. She's been described as a mixture of Gisele Bündchen and Bill Gates, and some of her work has been endorsed by Steve Jobs' Apple. Now, Lyndsey Scott is on a mission to encourage young girls to get involved in technology, and she joins me for our weekend conversation. Lyndsey, thank you so much for being up so early and hanging out with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So, first of all, you go to Amherst, you become a computer science major, and then you create these apps. So how did you get into coding in the first place?
Sure, I first started programming when I was maybe 13 on my TI-89 calculator. I was using TI Basic. I didn't really realize that this was computer science or computer programming at the time. But when I went to Amherst, I majored in theater and found myself also majoring in computer science. And at that time, I learned that it was something I really enjoyed.
So what's people's reaction to finding out that you lead this double life?
In my own mind, it hasn't felt like a double life at all, because I'm just doing things that I enjoy, things that I like. But yeah, it's been interesting over the past several months, getting attention in the media for doing things that come so naturally and that I enjoy so much. It's an interesting response that I'm getting. I guess the fact that I don't fit the typical stereotype of the computer programmer is something that people find interesting.
What do you think they're expecting?
I think it's a shame that there are these expectations that maybe they are expecting the typical programmer who's a white male. They call them geeks or nerds.
And then they get this top model, this gorgeous, tall beauty. So let's talk about that. I understand you just have an app that came out on Monday called Code Made Cool.
Yes.
And it's targeting young girls.
Yes.
Why do you think it's so important to get young girls involved in coding?
Sure. Well, as it is, there are very few graduates in computer science in college. I think 2.4% of college graduates graduate with degrees in computer science. And of that 2.4%, only 12% are women. So there are very, very few female computer programmers in our country right now. And especially at a time where technology is taking over everything, and we need more computer programmers in order to fuel our technology, I think it's important that we make computer science more inclusive, that we get women, minorities, people who aren't typically computer scientists involved in computer programming.
Do you think if they were just exposed to it, they might find greater interest in it?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually a lot of fun. With my app, it's a silly way. It's to kind of trick people into learning the core concepts of programming. You drag and drop and code your way through fantasy scenarios with Ryan Gosling.
I think I might be buying that app.
Yeah, maybe you should.
You might just have your newest client. Okay, so speaking of little girls, you answered a question someone posted to you online when they asked, what does it feel to go from physically unattractive to physically attractive? And you responded by posting this photo. Let's pull that up for the control room. There you are, bespectacled and all. So what message were you trying to send to other young women by posting that photo?
The question is a little funny, the way they ask the question, what it's like going from physically unattractive to attractive. I think I more answered what it's like having people treat you as if you're physically unattractive, and then having people treat you like you're so beautiful. I posted that at 3 a.m. I was drunk on code.
Drunk on code.
I was just in the middle of coding, and I saw this question pop up in my inbox, and it spoke to me. So I answered it. And I think it's just having that personal experience and realizing that the way people treat you changes so much based on your physical appearance, and that it's silly that people make such judgments on you based on your physical appearance. I guess I posted it just to see if anybody out there even identified with the same feeling, and a lot of people did. Yes, and I especially love hearing from young girls who were in that same position that I was in, where I felt like I had no one at the time. It wasn't just treated like I was unattractive. I was bullied. I was pushed around. I was invited to parties just to be uninvited. For example.
What did you do? How did you come through that?
You know, with time, at Amherst, I started finding myself a bit more and growing more confident in myself. In high school, I could barely look at people in the eye. Wow. I could barely talk to people without tearing up from fear of these social interactions. But over time, I've just become more comfortable in my own skin.
Now, speaking of skin, you've also broken some barriers in other ways. You were Calvin Klein's first black contracted runway model. Did you feel a double standard there? Did you feel any pressure to break stereotypes or even represent other models of color?
No, at the time, I didn't feel pressure in that way. I remember days before, this came out of nowhere, this job. Days before, I was standing on a street corner handing out flyers. My agency had me doing a job handing out flyers, and then all of a sudden at 11 p.m. at night, Calvin Klein calls me in. I do a walk for them, and right away they offer me the contract.
What were you thinking? What was going through your mind?
I didn't think it was real. For months and months afterwards, I was pinching myself. I couldn't believe it at all. And so I could barely sleep or think during this time. It wasn't on my mind necessarily about breaking barriers. But I think fashion is behind in a lot of ways. Even having one black model in the show and having that be revolutionary makes you realize the state that the industry's in.
So 5 years from now, before we go, if you were, do you see yourself modeling or behind a computer?
I've been asked this question quite a bit, and I tend not to think so far in advance. I like being able to do things that I enjoy doing, and I hope that I can continue doing the modeling, the acting, the programming for as long as it interests me, and I'm sure that'll be for hopefully longer than the 5
And I'm
years.
sure you'll have a lot of young women following in your footsteps trying to learn from your Code is Cool app. Thanks so much, Lyndsey Scott, actress, model, and computer programmer. Thanks so much, Lyndsey.
Thanks for having me.
Feather